Welcome everybody. We have a special guest joining us today. Everyone, this is Freya. Let's say hello. Say hi. What the heck is that? So she's doing very well. We're both doing very well. She's very cute. Hello. Alright, quit your gooing and garring. We're going to get to work now. So I'll give you like 5 seconds to settle down. Because I'm sure you're going crazy right now. Poor Miss Nuss. Anyway, so this video, guys, is the assessment task notification video for your research report. So this is the mini PIP assessment task that I've been talking about for a while now. And it's going to be really good practice run for Year 12 when you guys start doing your PIP, which is in term 4 of this year, by the way. So anyway, a little bit of a scary precursor for you, but this will put you in really good stead. So I'm just going to go through the assessment task notification, very similar like we would normally do in class, just so you've got a really clear understanding of what we're going to do. The other thing I'll just caveat now too is that each week you'll be getting a bit of class time to work on this, and each week I'll be doing a different video to help break that down further for you. But that'll start in week 4, but you'll get the notification early now because it's very important that you guys start thinking about what topic you would like to do for this task, because often that can take a few weeks of thinking and ideation. So without further ado, here we go. So it's your second task. It's weighted at 40% of your coursework for Year 11. In your HSC, the PIP is also weighted 40% of your whole coursework. So we're 40% of the whole subject actually. So it's even more important, but we're trying to replicate, I guess, similar conditions here. Technically, it's going to be assessing all 3 topics in Year 11. Now, we haven't done intercultural communication, but the way that our syllabus works is that at the end of each syllabus stop point in Year 11, you do some form of research, but it's not necessarily tied to the content of that topic. So in the social and cultural world, you guys remember that we did a content analysis on Donald Trump in a dinosaur political cartoon. For this topic, it's asking you to do a questionnaire, and then in this topic it asks you to do an interview. So we're just combining those sorts of elements. So it won't necessarily be on anything content related in that topic that we haven't done, but it's going to be just you guys applying an interview, which we'll do in this assessment task instead of doing it later. So it's assessing all 3 topics technically. The date you received it is 28th of the 4th. You should be watching this today, and received it in term 2 week 1, 7:30 AM. It is due in week 7 on the 9th of the 6th, which is a Friday, I believe. Let me just check. Yes, it is a Friday, so that's due on the Friday of week 7 at 2:45. So that's at the very end of the school day via Google Classroom. Now, you should probably have it maybe submitted by the end of lunch too on that day at the very latest to give you guys enough time, but that's where it is. Our email addresses are here. If you need anything, please feel free to email me. A Google Classroom comment I'm not as likely to jump on. I try to, but it doesn't notify me as quickly and efficiently. It sort of delays when I get that response. So email me directly if you have any questions, or you can see Miss Hickey as well. And there are Google Classroom codes, which you obviously have. So in terms of the task breakdown, you guys are required to complete a research report worth up to 40 marks and submit via Google Classroom on the due date. It's weighted at 40%, so each mark is worth 1% here. Very similar to the PIP. The PIP in Year 12 was out of 40 marks as well. So we're replicating that similar here. This part here is a very brief summary of what you're required to do, and then what you'll see is number 1 lines up with number 1 here, number 2 lines up with number 2 here, number 3 lines up with number 3, and so on and so forth. So this is sort of, I guess, a bit of a summary of what you're required to do. So what you need to do is, firstly, and you should definitely 100% do it in this order as well. This is like step by step. So the first thing you need to do is select an appropriate research topic in consultation with the classroom teacher. Now, in consultation with classroom teacher, obviously I'm not there, but this has a little bit of a caveat thing. There's a few ways you can go about it. One, you can double check with Miss Hickey if you would like. But two, is what I have done is I've put a table here of potential topics. So basically, anything that you want to look at within here, you can sort of look at. So that's, I guess, a bit of a guide for you as well. But in essence, you need to choose a topic, and it has to be sorry, she just jolted a bit there. And it has to be on a contemporary issue. So your research report that you're writing is based on a contemporary issue of your choice, and you're basically going to explore that contemporary issue. So what a contemporary issue is it's any current or modern issue that is currently affecting a significant amount of people at micro, meso, and macro levels, and remains either unresolved or highly controversial in nature. So some examples that we have here are things like the Black Lives Matter movement, same-sex marriage, death penalty, Aboriginal exclusion. What I mean by this, or Aboriginal exclusion, is that's quite a big and broad topic. That's Aboriginal exclusion in many different ways. You probably need to narrow that down if that's something you want to look at, but you can look at exclusion in terms of, for example, Aboriginal people are 10 times more likely to go to jail than non-Aboriginal people, despite only making up 3% of our population. So that's a times 10 increase in likelihood. But there's other areas you can look at with that as well. Things like racism, targeted discrimination, systemic racism, etc. Mandatory vaccinations, the concept of political correctness, abortion, Islamophobia, LGBTQIA adoption rights, euthanasia. So euthanasia is the act of assisted and voluntary suicide. So for example, in some parts in the world, you need to have a lot of psychologist appointments and doctor appointments and things like that. But in some parts of the world, euthanasia is legal, and that's where once you've gone through a bit of a medical process and psychological assessment, some people can assist you in dying, whether via a lethal injection or a pill is usually the two most common cases, or they'll put you to sleep. Cancel culture, festival pill testing, gender workplace quotas. So this is kind of like the idea that, or the contemporary issue around, do we need 50% male, 50% female representation in all workplaces, or is the concept of having a quota controversial in itself? So that's sort of an idea that you can explore there. Transgender athletes, and that you'd obviously have to probably narrow that down and pick a sporting code, I would imagine. Animal testing, immigration issues, asylum seekers, veganism, internet regulation. So I guess this idea that should the government intervene in regulating our internet, or should it be something that's free for us to use as we wish? And the idea, should Australia become a republic? So with all of these topics, standalone and on their own, they are all quite broad. You would obviously need to narrow that down a little bit, but these are sort of some broad overarching topics that you could look at. Now, one thing I do need to stress here is that although I'm not here, I do need you to get some kind of final approval. So probably either emailing me or seeing Miss Hickey is a great idea once you've got your topic down pat and you're ready to go. You can also discuss it with Miss Nuss as well. The other thing that you can do is to add your own contemporary issues in the boxes below. If you can think of any that you want to remember later, feel free to put in there. I'm sure I didn't grab them all there, and there's definitely a few more contemporary issues that you might want to look at further down the track. But the reason it's really important that we get final approval is that you guys are going to be conducting a lot of primary and secondary research there, and because of the controversial nature of a lot of these topics, it's really important that our research remains ethical and that you are not put in danger in any way, shape or form, and the idea that we as teachers have a professional responsibility to keep you from engaging in things that would be considered inappropriate. So that's why it's really important you still get final approval from us as your teacher before you proceed with your research. So as soon as you've got a topic down that you're interested in and you've narrowed it down a little bit, that would be when you would email me and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, I want to focus on this specific thing to do with my topic, what do you think? I'll email back and give you some advice. And basically the sooner you get this done, the sooner you can move on to the next steps. So step 2 is to then, once you've chosen a topic, is that you need to conduct some research using at least 2 research methods, including a questionnaire and interview. So in other words, you have to do a questionnaire and interview, and they count as your 2 research methods, your 2 primary research methods. Now you can do more if you wish, and I would probably recommend, if you're someone who's really wanting to push for that A range category, I'll get to the marking criteria a little bit later, but if you're someone who's really wanting to push into that A range, I would suggest doing a 3rd primary research method as well, because that will give you more chances to synthesize your research, and it will give you greater detail and a deeper understanding of your topic. And also, again, where we're trying to mirror the PIP in this sort of assessment task, is that having that 3rd research method is really key to success in that space. So other primary research methods you can look at, as you know, this is just from the syllabus, you can look at a few others. So everyone's definitely doing a questionnaire and everyone is definitely doing an interview, but some other ones that you could look at, a really good one's probably content analysis, because it's both quantitative and qualitative in some aspects. But I do think that when you're examining a contemporary issue, like any one of these, a content analysis can be really good. So let's say we're looking at something like Islamophobia, for example. This idea that some people display hostility, prejudice and discrimination against people who identify as part of the Islamic faith. You could look at a content analysis of, say, a newspaper article, for example, similar to how we looked at, say, a Donald Trump political cartoon. There might be one that is very overtly racist towards Islam people, and you could use that as a content analysis to inform some of your research. Or another example might be, for example, you might look at something to do with asylum seekers, and you might use a content analysis of a newspaper article which shows a very biased or skewed heading, or an image within that which might depict a point that you're trying to make. The idea, though, being with the content analysis, that you, as a qualitative method, is you're analysing and interpreting the themes. Okay, so you're breaking it down and making judgments about the meaning of that content. If you ever look at anything to do with social media, for example, you might weave something like that in, people's thoughts about, say, for example, euthanasia. There might have been a social media poll. You can grab a screenshot of that and do a content analysis. You can analyse some social media comments. A TikTok video as a form of content analysis if people are talking about any controversial issues that are being made. But there are certainly other ones that you could look at. You could look at something like a participant observation as a form of research. There is one called personal reflection as well, which is the use of or evaluation of personal experiences to demonstrate analysis and interpretation of data. So what that might look like is, let's say, for example, you are looking at topics, for example, such as transgender athletes, and you may identify as transgender yourself and be an athlete in that space, hypothetically. You can use your personal reflection as a valid form of research. Or if it's something like, say, the Black Lives Matter movement, and you're a person who identifies with an ethnicity such as Aboriginal or African American or whatnot, that aligns with that movement, your, experiences in that space are valid as well. So you can apply that to any of these two. But I think the main message being that you have to do a questionnaire and you have to do an interview. Now, we last term did a questionnaire and an interview, so you guys know how to do them. I will create a video and some templates to help you with that though as well. But I would say picking a 3rd one, I'd strongly recommend doing that. Just keep in mind though, whatever you do choose, make sure you follow the ethical research guidelines stipulated by page 21 of our syllabus, which looks like this, but you all have a copy of that anyway, so you can go through and look at that at your leisure. So the third step, once you've created your questionnaire and you've done some interviews, is that you want to conduct some secondary research. So typically once you create your questionnaire, you send it out. Once you write some interview questions, you may book in some interview time. So while you're sort of waiting for that data to come through, you want to start conducting secondary research as our third step here. And the main purpose of this is to synthesize the findings of your primary research. So remember, synthesize is bringing things together. So we want to make a holistic argument combining both primary research and secondary research. So the sort of types of secondary research I would recommend here are things of this nature. So looking at academic papers or journal articles. So I will do a separate video on how to conduct some secondary research effectively, including some really good websites that you guys will find useful in your research. But academic papers and journal articles are reliable sources, so we want to use them. A reputable website, so something that is legit and authentic. You can use textbooks or various other books and ebooks on the topic as well. A lot of those are freely available online, or you may have read a book that's really particularly pertinent to a topic that you're looking at. A newspaper editorial piece is really good as well. So any newspaper article from the ABC, The Guardian. Again, if you are wanting to find non-bias or limited bias articles, don't forget that we did that lesson on analysing media articles here, and there's a whole list of websites here on Google Classroom dated the 3rd of April that you can use and search around for research articles for your topic. So it might be something like you go to ABC News, in the search bar you might type in the name of your topic or the thing that it's related to, and you'll get a lot of articles that come up in relation to that. So that's a good idea to do. Though again, when conducting secondary research, make sure you adhere to those ethical research guidelines. So once you've done your primary research and your secondary research, the fourth thing you want to do is make sure that you address change over time and cultural difference in your report. So the next 4 and 5 you sort of do at the same time, but you want to be aware of number 4 before you proceed with number 5. So part of this task is that you are required to address what I've called change over time and cultural difference throughout your research report. So what these things mean are as follows. So change over time means that throughout your report, your research report on your contemporary issue, I need you guys to assess the extent of change over time regarding your issue. And so what this means is looking at different perspectives over time, opinions, values or beliefs, and socialization differences, for example. It doesn't have to be all of those things, but these are some examples. So if I was to say talk about veganism, for example, as a topic, and I want to look at change over time, I might assess how people's attitudes, perspectives and beliefs have changed towards veganism over time. So just colloquially, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, veganism was something that some people may not have even heard of. It wasn't as common as it is today, and a lot of people's perspectives towards it has shifted over time. People are a lot more open to this idea of being a vegan in contemporary society than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago. So as part of your research, you would examine why those beliefs or opinions have changed over time. Similar with something, say, like same-sex marriage, for example, you might assess what are the beliefs and values of society and how has that changed over time to allow the legalization of same-sex marriage, but also examining what may have stayed the same over time. If some views have obviously changed, but it's at some level it stayed the same, otherwise it wouldn't be considered a contemporary issue. So you're sort of examining the extent of the change over time. So when we say assess, if you guys want to annotate this, this means to make a judgment. So you're evaluating it, so that's very higher order. And when we're looking at the extent to something, we're looking at the range. So is it a large extent? Is it a small extent? Is it a big extent? Is it a limited extent? Is it significant? Is it You know, those sorts of things is what you want to think of when you're talking about the extent to something. And it's okay to say that to some extent that it has not experienced much change over time in some areas, whereas other areas it has experienced a lot of change. So it can be nuanced. It doesn't have to be black or white. It can be a bit grey. So that's what change over time is. Cultural difference is another point that you want to weave throughout your report. So this is where you address one, okay, highlight that, one cultural perspective throughout your report that differs from that of the researcher. So what I mean by this is that when you pick a topic, you should be comparing it or analysing it. Okay, well, you should be comparing or analysing it against a different culture, or what we would call cultural difference. And this can include one of the following here, are the most common ones. So gender, sexuality, religion, ethnicity, social class, or generations. So this idea here is that you're going to be viewing your contemporary issue from a different viewpoint. So let's look at some topics to give you kind of an example. Let's say we'll look at something like, let's say, the death penalty, right? If we were to apply a cultural difference to this, we could look at how the death penalty is influenced by gender. So is it men or women who are more likely to be put on the death row? Is there, if you were to look at something else like sexuality, okay, what's the difference between heterosexual and heteronormative people on the death penalty versus how many people have experienced the death penalty who are homosexual or bisexual, for example? Or you might look at the concept of religion and apply it to the death penalty. You know, how do certain religions view this concept of the death penalty? Like, for example, Catholicism, it's very frowned upon because the idea is that people should have a chance, you know, to save their soul before they die, whereas other religions, or even the idea or the absence of religion, how does that influence the death penalty? If we look at different social class or generations viewpoints of it, how is that experienced? Or how is it different? So you can apply that to any topic here. Like if you did something like mandatory vaccinations, is it one particular generation that is more against it than another? Is it one particular sexuality that's more against it or another, or gender or religion, for example? So the idea is that this will kind of help narrow down your topic, I guess, in some ways, but in the PIP, the reason that we have these two things is because the PIP examines something very similar in the PIP, where you have to look at what they call a cross-cultural perspective, is that throughout your PIP you need to refer to a different perspective based on culture, but it can typically include a difference of gender, sexuality, religion, ethnicity, social class, and or generations. I will show you some sample, and we will break down some sample paragraphs of different research projects I've collected over time, which show you how to weave these two elements in, so you won't, I guess, be left in the dark there. Might sound a bit overwhelming or intimidating at this point in time, but it is something that you can do. And a lot of the time, these two can sort of even weave together. So say, for example, if you're looking at differences in, say, same-sex marriage again, and different religious views on it, you might find that that has changed over time as well. So you can sort of see how they can all mush together, I guess. Okay, so that's step 4. Step 5 is that you need to present your findings and conclusions in a written research report. So, written research report requirements. So I don't know if you noticed, but I've changed child. Do you want to say hi, Patrick? Can you say hi? You're a bit shy. He's just woken up, so he is a bit tired. You want to say hi, year 11?
They're all gone.
They're all gone? I hope not. I hope they're all still there. Anyway, so with your written research report requirements, you have to present it in a written format. So to help you do this, once you've narrowed down your topic, and once you've got your change over time and cultural difference components sorted, that should narrow it down a bit for you. What you want to do then is sort of develop 2 or 3 focus questions. You might have more as well, nothing wrong with that. But you should have about 2 or 3 focus questions in a logical order before you write your report, so that you can develop your research and your written answer, I guess, to your contemporary issue in a logical and coherent way. So you might have a few sub-questions breaking down what it is you want to talk about. You might then have lots of sub-questions, but the idea is that you've got a couple, 2 to 3 main focus questions to sort of drive your written research report based off the findings of your research is a really good idea. What do you think? So yeah, that's sort of, I guess, the main crux of that. Once we move down here though, we've got a bit more of the nitty gritty of your research report. So I guess these are the rules, right? So obviously the first one is your work cannot be plagiarized in any way, shape or form, and this can result in a mark of 0. So just don't do it, guys. I'll show you what it looks like briefly. If you think you can get away with it, you just won't. So this is obviously another subject, a different assignment, but this is what comes back to us if you plagiarize. So here we have 55 different matches, okay, which is not good. So, and it really does depend on what is highlighted. So say if we look, obviously this task is on the Great Barrier Reef. If we look at something like, 400 types of coral, 1,500 species, 4,000 types of mollusks, that sort of stuff you can't change, right? That's what we would call a definition or something. So little things like that, when they come up, are not a problem. And we can see that coming up here, right? Now, obviously you're not going to be talking about 2,000 kilometers of coastline being stretched, but when something like this comes back and it's a whole paragraph, it's not a good look, but it's very easy for me to see the exact website that it comes from. All I have to do is click on it, click on that passage, and it tells me exactly the website that it's from. And here I can see we've got it from this website here. Okay, we've borrowed someone else's essay and then we've just uploaded it as our own. So it's really clear to us if plagiarism has occurred. So I don't know how else to say it other than don't do it. It will not end well for you. You'll probably get a 0 and it won't look good on your report, and it's not a good look for me if this is a subject you're wanting to continue with in Year 12, in the PIP, in the HSC major work. What do you think about plagiarism, Patrick? Is it bad? Do you say yes? Yeah, he thinks it's not good. Alright, so just don't do it. It's just really not worth it. And we can see the percentage of it. So 56% is flagged and only 2% of this work is actually cited. Okay, we see a majority of it's come from this website here, but there's a lot of other ones here. Okay, next thing is the word limit. So you'll probably notice that this is quite a large word limit range. It's 1,000 to 2,000 word limit. So that's the limit. Okay, 1,000 to 2,000. So that means that that is the minimum and that is the maximum. If you write 2,001 words, I will not consider the last word you wrote for marking. I just won't. It's not a word suggestion. It's not a word you can go 10% under or over. Nothing like that. It is a 1,000, 2,000 word limit. Okay. Naturally, again, if you're wanting to push to the A range and you wanting to have a lot of detail, you wanting to have a lot of synthesis, you would be pushing as close to 2,000 as you can, and I would expect everyone in my class to be doing that. Your footnoting and referencing, which we'll get to a bit later, is not included in the word count. Okay, so this is just your essay itself. All right, are you hungry? Do you want me to get you something to eat? Okay, we'll be back. Alright. So, yeah, 1,000 to 2,000 word limit. The other thing that we have to do, and again, we're trying to keep this consistent with what the NESA expectations are for the PIP, and that is font size. So it has to be size 12. either in Arial or Times New Roman. If you like any other font style, I'm sorry, it won't cut it. So Arial and New Times only. You have to have 1.5 line spacing and 2.54 centimeter margins. Now note that that's the default setting. If you're not sure how to do line spacing, I'll show you real quick now. Let's say you're on your Google Doc, line spacing, if you go towards the top, you'll see, and if I hover over this arrow here, line and paragraph spacing, if you click that, you want to make that 1.5. And then that's it. That's how you do line spacing. Again, that's just keeping it consistent with the NESA PIP expectations, and we want to try and replicate that here. The other mandatory requirement is that you are footnoting your research. I know there are other research citation systems out there. However, we're going to do footnoting. The reason we do footnoting is because it doesn't chew into your word count. If you do in-text citations, if you do something like in-text citations, technically it doesn't contribute to your word count, but it's a really painful thing for you to highlight all the in-text citations and take them out and then see what your word count is. So it's much easier to keep footnoting in. It actually makes it look a bit neater, and when we do our footnoting lesson, which will be in another video, it's a really good indication for you as a self-assessment tool to see if you put primary research in, secondary research, and if you've triangulated that. It's really easy to see that in footnoting, whereas in in-text citations it's a bit more difficult. So everyone's just going to be footnoting. Again, I'll show you how to footnote in another video. The other thing is that you'll need an annotated bibliography of all research methods, so all your primary research methods you've done, so a questionnaire and an interview at least, and then let's say if you do a content analysis, that'll need to be there as well. And then all the secondary research articles that you've used, so the individual articles, okay? So not just secondary research in general, but individual ones. Now, an annotated bibliography is something you may or may not have heard of. You guys have probably all heard of a bibliography before. A bibliography is where you just list all the information that you've used. An annotated bibliography is where you annotate and talk about each individual piece of research that you've done. You talk about why it was useful to your research, why you used it, if it contained any bias, how you were ethical in conducting that research. So I'll show you just a very brief example now so you can visualize it. So these are what some sample annotations might look like. You'll have your source here, and then you'll have an annotation. So this is a tremendously useful source. It outlined this. This allowed me to understand the violations made by the juvenile justice system, which was useful in analysing meso-perspectives of my research topic. It was valid and reliable, blah, 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 blah. So you do that with every single research method. I will give you guys a bunch of sample annotations as well that you can use for your task. The questionnaire form you should attach as well as part of your submission. So that doesn't mean you need to print it out, but if you just attach it to the submission portal so I can look at it, that would be good as well. And an interview transcript should be attached as part of it as well. So that can either be in the form of a written transcript, or when you interview someone, typically you would record it because it makes it a bit easier for you, and you can attach the recording if you prefer. I don't mind which one, a visual transcript or an audible transcript is fine, but that should be part of your submission as well. And you may want to include a title page if you want. It's not compulsory, but you're going to put a lot of work into this, so if you want to make it a little bit pretty with the title page, go for it. The other thing that you should use is what we call the research report scaffold provided on Google Classroom, and that will assist you with formatting. So what it looks like is this. So all of you will get your own copy of this on Google Classroom. It's attached to the post that you found this video on. You got your title page here if you want, a table of contents. Now I've already formatted this so it'll automatically refresh. So depending on what you call your focus question 1 or 2 or whatever it is, that once you hit the refresh button, it'll refresh all the page numbers and all the titles for you. What we've also got in each section is a little bit of a box which is a prompt guide for you. And you can tick this off as you go, which is kind of neat. So it'll look something like this. So you will have sort of obviously an introduction to your research paper, then you'll look at your 2 to 3 focus questions, and then your conclusion. So each of these have a little bit of a guide of what is expected for you to write as you go. Are you feeding Momo? He's got banana on his face. Does Momo think it's yummy? Yeah. So I'll start with a general paragraph thing. So this guide is just to making sure that you guys are cross-checking all the things you need to do to get an A. Again, I'll go over that in a lot more depth in another video, but I guess the idea is just so that you guys know that you'll have a scaffold there. The other thing that you'll have... You okay, bud?
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing that you'll have is some scaffold documents to go with you as well. So this is just a page from the syllabus which talks about the process of research, which is basically what our assessment notification is modelled off in terms of steps 1 through to 6. I've just made it a little bit more succinct for us, but that's what it's based off, so that's there if you find that helpful. We'll go through the AusA research structure, so similar to, well, we haven't even done that yet actually, but similar to how we really explicitly in term 1, I taught you guys how to answer past HSC questions. I'm going to teach you really explicitly in another video how to use this research report paragraph structure to write a killer mini pip. We'll also look at some samples. So these are different samples from research reports in the past, which we'll be able to highlight and code according to this paragraph structure. But through this, you'll also see the change over time and cultural difference aspects of your task there as well. We've also got a lot of starter statements and sentence starters there for you, which we'll go through in another video, how to do footnoting, how to write an annotated bibliography and all that sort of stuff. So there'll be a lot of support scaffolds for you guys to use, and it's really important that you do engage with those. So that's step 5. Step 6 is that you write your annotated bibliography, but I'll go over that in another lesson. I've already talked a little bit about it now. There will be a lot of additional supporting materials here for you to look at as well. So a lot of those guides that I just spoke about, I'm going to create a video guide for each sort of step in here that you can use. So for example, I'll create an individual guide on topic selection, an individual video guide on how to conduct a questionnaire and interview again, how to do good secondary research and so on. So you'll have all those video guides there for you as well. Plus that exemplar sheet I just showed you has all of these guides in it, which will be attached. What I'll also attach to the post and go over in a separate video. It's onk. It's orange. Patrick calls orange onk. What colour is this?
Blue.
It is blue. That's right. And who's that on the screen?
Daddy.
It is Daddy. That's right. What we'll also attach is samples from an A to E range to this task as well, and I'll go through that in a separate video too. Is your dinner all gone?
If I need gone.
Do you want some more?
No.
Okay. Alright, you just sit tight, we're nearly done. So I'll give you an A to E range of what that report will look like based off previous research reports. Now, obviously the topics that they had done and the assignment that they were doing is much different to yours, but you'll see some definite examples on what that looks like there.
Helpful.
So quickly, some FAQs. Can I go below or over the word limit? No. The answer is no. What if my computer blows up and my work is lost? There'll be no special consideration for technology failure. Everything should be backed up on Google Docs. Isn't that right, buddy? Are we going to work on this in class? Yes, you will. Weeks 4 to 7, you'll have every class lesson to be working on it, as well as your free periods. So make sure you utilise your time wisely, but there will be a lot of class time to work on it as well. And the idea is that in those class lessons, so say one of those lessons per week, you'll be watching the video guides with me. You'll then work on it in your free periods, and then the next lesson that you have in class, you'll be able to, or the idea is that you should have finished that weekly update or progress at that point in time. Do you work on this assignment at home? So although you've got a lot of class time, you probably need to work on it.
It's all finished.
It is all finished, but I'm not finished yet.
No.
No, that's right.
He hop down.
You want to hop down?
He did hop through.
Dad hop down. My third child, Bondo, is joining me now. Someone's my other one. So you'll still need to work on this assignment at home, even though you have a lot of class time to do it. So making sure you're doing that as well. Should I use personal language in my report? So a lot of the samples we're going to look at, you will notice that there's a lot of personal language being used, and generally speaking that's quite frowned upon, but society and culture, especially in the PIP, because it's a personal interest project they call it, and this is a mini version of that, you can use first person language to a certain extent. I'm going to sort of talk a bit more about that in the next video, but typically you're not going to say me, we, us and our, or you or your. The only ones that you'll probably say is my or I. My or I. And the idea is that when you're talking about my interview revealed this, when synthesizing my research findings, I found that. So you can use that kind of language, and in the PIP they sort of encourage you to do it, but you can still see that when you're referring to it in that way, it's still coming across as academic and professional. It's not colloquial and vernacular in the way that it's vernacular just means it's a bit cash. So making sure that it's still formal. How many secondary sources should I reference? There is no limit. A good research paper will utilize and reference a lot. A great research paper will synthesize all their findings. So there is no limit. Basically, the more the merrier. Don't feel like if you've got 10 footnotes on a page that, oh, none of it's my own work, I've just used a lot of research. The idea is we want you to use a lot of research to back up your ideas. So the more you have, the better. Can I include graphs or images? Absolutely. So you can include them, and you're encouraged to do so. I think it makes a mini PIP look better, and a PIP as well. But it also can help explore your topic even deeper and further. So say for example, again, we're doing a content analysis. You can put the image of whatever content analysis it is you're looking at and stick that in. The other thing that you can do is when you do your Google Forms and you do your questionnaire, when you look at the information, it'll automatically generate pie charts and different graphs for you as well. You can snippet those and put them in your research report too. The only thing is that once you put it in there, that you label it and you're clearly saying what it is, and that you footnote it. If you just stick in random images and graphs in with no explanation of what they are, then that's frowned upon. So making sure they're relevant, sourced and effectively integrated is the key there. Can you submit a draft feedback? So there's going to be no formal draft submission process for this task, because you're going to be working on it in class, and you're going to have the teacher there checking your progress from weeks 4 to 7 intensely. There's going to be no formal checking process. Now, I hear you probably thinking, yeah, sir, but you're not there, so how can you check it? I am going to be checking it from home, so the more that you do, you can just email me and ask me to check it at any point, and I'll do that. I'll also be routinely going into Google Classroom and checking your work each week, starting from week 4 through to 7, so that you'll have that support, same as normal as you would with me as well. And if you would like a phone call or something during that time, you can just email me as well. I'm happy to do that, but I'll just usually do Google Classroom document comments and things like that. So, and that's the same for all the classes too. If you do want that immediate in-person feedback based on the task, you can see Miss Hickey and she'll be able to provide that for you as well. If you're struggling and you need more help, what can you do? You can let me know. You can also let me know. You can see Student Services. There's COVID tutors, Aboriginal Education Team if you qualify for that, and there's Wednesday afternoon homework centre there as well that you can use. Please make sure you attempt this task genuinely, that you try your best, and that you seek my feedback before it's due, and if there's any concerns, you let Miss Nuss know before the due date. The marking criteria. So we'll go through what the A range looks like. So the first one is that you need to demonstrate thorough and sustained synthesis of ideas, issues and information relating to one contemporary issue. So what this looks at is thorough, meaning that throughout the whole research report, it's detailed. It's not, you're not just explaining something in one sentence and leaving it at that. You're going into a lot of depth in what you're saying. And then the idea of sustained, meaning that you're doing it regularly. So you don't have, say, one paragraph that's really, really good in depth and in detail, and then the next paragraph it's not as detailed, or it's very short and brief. That would be inconsistent. So the idea of sustained is that you're doing it well, and you're doing it well consistently. And then the synthesis, obviously, is that you guys bringing your primary research and your secondary research together. Okay, that's what synthesis is. So in a nutshell, this first one is about you in detail and consistently synthesizing your primary and secondary research relating to your contemporary issue all the time, being relentless about it. The second dot point is effectively applies social and cultural research methods and makes informed judgments on usefulness, validity, and bias of information. So this has sort of got two parts to it. The first bit, effectively applying social and cultural research methods. So again, if you're constantly referring to your primary research, constantly referring to your secondary research, you're talking about your questionnaire and your interview in a lot of depth and detail, and potentially your third one as well, to make it really effective, and you're doing it all the time, that's what I would class as effective. So again, if you do it in one paragraph and not another, or let's say you use your questionnaire 20 times in a row and then you just reference your interview twice, it's not going to be as effective as if you're using multiple different forms of data. So keeping that in mind as well. The second bit is making informed judgments on the usefulness, validity, and bias of information, and that comes through really strongly in your annotated bibliography, where you're literally going to make judgments and evaluate your sources. So doing that really at a high level, including usefulness, validity, and bias in each annotation is important there, but I will talk about more of that in the annotated bibliography video. The third one is effectively applying and integrating social and cultural terms and concepts throughout, something you guys are very familiar with what we did in the last topic. You always want to be embedding... Yes, buddy? You want me to read a book? Yeah, you can read it there, that's fine. So very similar, you want to be applying those concepts and terms throughout. Anywhere that you could use a concept or a society and culture term, you want to use that instead of any other word, and integrating that throughout. Okay, so making sure it makes sense. You're not just concept vomiting everything. And I guess the second half of that is comprehensively addressing change over time and cultural difference. So making sure that you, in your research report, when you're talking about your contemporary issue, that you are referring to any changes over time, as well as any cultural differences based off the one that you've chosen, and that you're doing that consistently. The last one is presenting a clear, coherent, and well-structured research report that contains highly effective communication skills, incorporating accurate and appropriate language, and, where applicable, graphic forms. So you don't have to include graphs, but if you do, they've got to be applicable, and that they need to be accurate and appropriate. So this is very much to do with your writing and your written structure. Do your ideas flow well? Do they lead from one point to the next? Are you following that really good Aussie structure that we're going to talk about in another video a bit later? That will help structure your research. Are you referring to your research very often? So you can sort of almost see that if you do this top dot point really well and you focus on that, all of this sort of flows thereafter. Okay, if you're constantly referring and synthesizing your primary and secondary data throughout the whole thing, then naturally you're effectively applying your research. Naturally, you're going to then have a lot of space to make your annotations. You're then going to be applying social and cultural terms and addressing your ideas thoroughly, because you're referring to and referencing it so many times. All right, that's it. It was a big one today, but that's your assessment task notification video in a nutshell. Please feel free to take advantage and rewatch this as many times as you like, but I will have certain videos, and they'll be much shorter, don't worry, breaking down each of these sections for you that you can look at as you go. Best of luck with your assignment. Thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.